We're filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive on the campus at Hamilton. I'm very pleased to have Genevieve Rose as my guest, who I can say through experience is one heck of a bass player.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
As I was saying before the cameras were rolling, I'm used to interviewing people that could be my grandfather or grandmother. I'm not so used to interviewing someone who could be my daughter, which says something about my age, I guess. But it's a pleasure to have you here, and I know you've been getting quite a good deal of press lately. How about just telling me about your most recent meaningful gig for you?
Well, the most recent one was at the end of February at the Academy of Music in Northampton, Massachusetts, and we were playing for Claude Williams' 90th birthday, Claude Fiddler Williams. He turned 90 that day, and with Bucky Pizzarelli also. He was playing guitar. It was a wonderful performance. The place was packed, and that was the most recent gig.
So we had, what, 75 years age difference, 74, 75 between you and Claude?
Well,
even more
70.
than that. 70.
70, right? Or
70.
almost. Well, 21, so.
Yeah. How do you two communicate with that age gap there?
Well, I think it's just the same as I'd be communicating with anyone my own age or, you know, your age. Or I don't really find it to be too much of a difference because it's all music, and music is kind of a universal language. And the generation gap doesn't seem to really change that at all. You know?
Is there any kind of jazz lingo or phrases that he might use that you're not quite used to at first?
Oh, I suppose so, because he has so many years of experience in playing in a vast variety of settings. I think that's what makes the playing more enjoyable, because he has such a diverse background, and I'm relatively new at this.
I remember he said, remember when we had played together, and during one song, he leaned over and he said "channel" to me, and for a minute I didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I actually, he had said that one time to me. He was discussing that, and I didn't know either, but then we found out that it meant the bridge of the tune.
Right.
You know, but yeah, I guess that could be a little bit confusing. But
you kind of just pretend.
I kind of, just sort of hear where he's going and then go along with it. But but I find, that it's a lot more enjoyable and wonderful to play with players that have, more of a background and more experience, because I learn more from that. So yeah, there's a lot of new things that I hear while I'm playing, but then again, I'm learning from that also.
Right. Well, what exactly, can you pinpoint what launched you into being a jazz musician? You were born in 76. So the music that you were listening to as you grew up was what was going on in your household? Well,
I listened a lot to the oldies, 50s and 60s type of music. There's a radio station around my area, it's called Big D 103, and so I'd always listen to that all the time. My brother listened to a lot of the current music, but I never really did. I was mostly enjoyed the oldies, and I think, I got involved with music pretty early. I was 8 years old, and I started with the guitar. At the same time, my brother started piano lessons. And so really before that, I wasn't really concerned too much with listening to music. I mean, I heard it, but it didn't really hit me with anything, For some reason, I wanted to play the guitar. I didn't know why. And so I ended up taking 10 years of guitar lessons, and it was all classical. classical guitar. I just love that. So when I was growing up and I was playing the guitar, mostly I listened to classical guitar music, you know, Segovia, those. So that's what I had. And then my brother, he did a lot of composing of his own music. So I listened to that. And then towards the end, my brother got involved with jazz. And so he would play jazz on his radio in his room, you know, different recordings. It was kind of interesting. And I had wanted to play the guitar in ensembles at school because all the other playing I had done was outside groups, and so I wanted to do something in the public school. They already had guitar players in like the jazz band, so they said to play electric bass. So I'd sort of, you know, gotten into this jazz music that way. And my brother had given me a bunch of blank tapes, and he said, "Oh, listen to these, unmarked tapes of jazz music."
So you didn't really know
I didn't know who it was, and I found out later, like the first one that I had, and I listened over and over again, was Charlie Parker, Bird, you know, with the tune Laura and the strings and all that. And I thought it was great, but I didn't know it was Charlie Parker. It was just, you know. And so I was listening to that and listening to a lot of other, I know he had a tape of Thelonious Monk, and then there was a tape of some Billy Taylor playing. So I got into listening to that, and I was really intrigued by it. And at the same time, I was starting to play jazz a little bit. And when I got to my sophomore year of high school, you know, I became more interested with the stand-up bass. It was the first day I'd started on electric bass, and then switched over to the stand-up bass because I saw it in the closet at the music school, and I was like, I want to play that, you know. So nobody I knew played it. And so it was just from playing that I got more interested in jazz, and I did a competition in my sophomore year where I played, first time I ever played a solo, and I received an award, and I couldn't believe it, and so that helped fuel, you know, me to do more playing of jazz, and that's really how I got into it. Just
Let me take you back for a moment. Listening to the oldies station, as you look back on that, is there anything there that you think you absorbed from that music?
Just an appreciation for music, and that's for one thing. Secondly, I think I was always I liked tunes. I figured it out later that had really good bass lines to them. So I think that helped out. Rhythm, you know, they always had pretty.
Right.
But
yeah, as you listen to, and they're very arranged almost. It's easy to hear the form of them, and probably instilled a good knowledge of that. Were you ever tempted to play the chords to Luai Luai on your guitar?
Not really, no, because I'd gotten so involved with the classical music. You know, my teacher was a classical guitarist, and I liked that. So I never played any oldies on my guitar, or any jazz on my guitar for that matter either. Just basically the classical music.
What kind of outlet did you have to perform the classical guitar music?
Well, I took lessons for 10 years at the Community Music School, Springfield. So they had recitals every year that you could perform in, and they had combos. You know, I had one year was 2 recorders and guitar, another year was 4 guitars. So that was nice to be able to have a variety of ensembles to play with. And also the Connecticut Classical Guitar Society that was based in West Hartford. My teacher was the executive director, Penny Phillips. So I was involved with performing in concerts there, and also with the Connecticut Classical Guitar Society Guitar Ensemble, which had maybe between 10 and at one point maybe 14 guitar players. So I was part of that. So there were a lot of opportunities to play, and also through the music school, I did a lot of volunteer functions. So I'd play Christmas parties or background music for house tours. You know, a lot of variety of playing, and I think it was a great experience because now I don't feel nervous doing any kind of performing. You know, so it was a lot of years of solo guitar playing.
Thing about becoming a professional, about playing gigs, showing up on time, all that, knowing what's appropriate in the different gigs, I think you probably got pretty early then.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, there was a lot of opportunity for it. So,
when you think of jazz, what was current? By the time it must have been early '80s when you started becoming aware of jazz. Is that true?
Well, not really, no, because I didn't start till I was 8, and that was in 1985.
Okay,
So I didn't really get into the jazz until early 90s, maybe.
Oh, all right. So, gee, what's current then? That's only like 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Did you ever get into what, for lack of a better term nowadays, is called contemporary jazz, the Kenny G type of thing?
No, I wasn't really involved with that. So, because, my brother had given me tapes of a lot of, older styles of music, but I didn't actually go out and actively seek to listen to jazz because it wasn't something I was really interested in until my sophomore year of high school. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't, actively involved with it. After my sophomore year, and I started beginning to play a lot more, I was concerned about not wanting to sound like a lot of other bass players. I wanted my own individual sound, so I didn't do a lot of listening at first. I didn't learn a lot of history either. I just kind of like played and tried to develop my own sound. So I didn't listen to the contemporary stuff. Not a lot of listening, no.
There was a conscious decision on your part that you didn't want to become a copycat of someone else?
Right, because a lot of people said, well, transcribe these solos or these bass lines, and I understand why they say that. It's a good idea to, get the style, of a certain player, but I didn't want to be copying lines from that. No, I wanted to try to bring my own sound to the music.
Right. Well, let me see if you can remember the first time you came home from high school and told your mother that you were now going to be playing the acoustic bass. Was she familiar with what that instrument really was?
Oh, yes, well, because I didn't actually just switch, I didn't say I'm playing guitar today and tomorrow I'm playing bass, It was gradual, so I just kind of played bass on the side. I also played, when I was in high school, a year, I did bassoon, I played baritone horn in the marching bands. I did a lot of different instruments. The bass was just one of them. And so that was really gradual. It wasn't until maybe like my senior year of high school that I actually decided that I was going to concentrate on the bass, because up until that point I was doing so much guitar work. I hadn't had any formal lessons on the bass. I just basically taught myself, so like my technique wasn't really great or anything. But I started finding more and more opportunities. I was playing, I was enjoying it more, and I really liked the style of music that I was able to improvise and put in my own voice into the music. And so it was just gradual, and my mother's been always very supportive of, whatever instrument that I wanted to play, and I think that she's happy as long as, I'm happy, and I was very, I really enjoyed being able to put my own self into the playing, into the music, but through improvisation.
Yeah. How does she feel about you being in these New York City nightclubs,
Oh, she loves it. She came, she drove me down there so I wouldn't have to leave my car down there. But she's very supportive of everything, And for a long time, when I first started, I didn't have a vehicle. She was chauffeuring me to every performance and rehearsal, and
she was a jazz mom, not a soccer mom, right?
Yes, it was like her full-time job for a while.
I want to ask you a little more about a couple of those gigs later, but did you become kind of, how do I put this, an interesting character in high school that, you're not that big a person either, and here's this young lady playing the acoustic bass.
Yeah.
You kind of like this.
Well, I came from a very sports-based high school, too, so a lot of people weren't very supportive of the music department, except for the people in there. But I think they thought it was really interesting. I mean, it was, this huge instrument, and, I had been doing really well playing, and I also played electric bass in all the top 40 concerts in high school, too, so they liked that, because they liked that kind of music. So, the jazz was just kind of second for the rest of the kids in the school.
Sounds like you were a person that they were sorry to see graduate, at least in the music department.
Yeah, I don't know.
You became like, a valuable person to have.
There. I tried to do everything in the music department. I was, I did the jazz band, I did the rhythm section for the show choir one year, and so I did a lot of volunteering.
Was there a significant live performance along the way that you got to see, or a number of them that heightened your interest in the music? Seeing some well-known musicians, perhaps?
Well, I think what definitely helped a lot was doing the jazz workshops in the summer. Like in the summer of '94 and '95, I did the Vermont Jazz Summer Workshop, and also that was, Attila Zoller's workshop, and also I did Jazz in July workshops, Billy Taylor's workshop there, and meeting all those musicians, and it's kind of a hands-on experience. That really helped a lot. And of course, they'd have the concerts, so you could see the work with them. I'd say that was a very big influence there. Yeah. Especially meeting people in person, that was always important to me. Right. But I can't think offhand of a particular concert.
Well, who have become your favorite bass players then?
Well, I enjoy music from a lot of different bass players. I like some of Ray Brown's and some of Ron Carter's. There's a bass player on actually one of Benny Waters' CDs, Bob Bowman. No, actually, I'm sorry, that's Claude Williams' CD, Bob Bowman. And I basically try to listen for specific recordings that I like. I don't buy them just for the artist, but for that particular recording, Like, for example, I like Ron Carter's on Alone Together with Jim Hall, So particular recordings, that's what I look mostly for. And some of the bassists are, no-name bassists, and I just enjoy it, the way it sounds, or a particular solo. But I look mostly at a particular recording rather than the artists themselves. So I'd say variety.
Is there a gig or a particular series of gigs, it's almost the same question, but that you felt like, man, this is the big time in the jazz world? When did that particularly happen?
Well, I really enjoyed performing last October down in New York with Benny Waters, a saxophone player, at Sweet Basil's Jazz Club in New York. That was the first time I ever really publicly played in New York City, and it was a week-long engagement, and I really enjoyed that. I mean,
well, there you
that
are.
Felt great.
One of the top clubs in New York, with he was 95 at the time.
Yes, that's correct.
And I've heard he could be a bit demanding of his rhythm section. Is that right?
I suppose. We had, I think it was like an hour intense rehearsal. He rattled off maybe 30 tunes that we'd run through. It was just start, stop, start, stop, start on the Tuesday before we started, just to get an idea of how he was going to be playing, endings and beginnings. But I like that, though. I like to have the artist, let me know what they want. That's important to me. And, still give me a lot of space, but I like that. I like a challenge, too.
Did you say something about having to sleep in your car that week?
Yeah.
I had to remember that, didn't I?
Yeah, well, actually, my mother and I, we have a pickup truck, so, yeah. And we couldn't find, a friend had said that we could borrow an apartment for a night to stay in, and we couldn't find a parking spot anywhere near. And finally it got to be, like, the only parking spots were so far away, we didn't think it would be safe to walk to the... So we ended up driving out of the city, up past, like, Yonkers, and we found a side street, and we just kind of camped out in the back. It was very cold.
That's going to be a great story when we do this next interview, like, 20, 30 years from now, and you can talk about your first gig in New York, and you had to sleep in your car. Yeah. It was freezing, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder what your mother was thinking. Like, what have we gotten into here?
I think an adventure, it was eventful. I think it was great.
Was she there for the gigs?
She stayed the first time and then came for the last night, too. And so it was great.
That's great.
She's very supportive, and I think that's very important.
You had mentioned that you've won about, sounds like a batting average here, 20 consecutive Most Valuable Player awards, in these high school festivals?
Right. Yeah, our school every year would do, maybe 6 competitions, that type of thing. And since my sophomore year to my senior year, first one of my sophomore year, I received an MVP, 20 of them, yeah. So it was great. It really helped. It was a positive reinforcement for me to keep playing and trying harder with the music because, I'd get done with a competition, I'd say, oh, that was a terrible solo or this or that, very self-critical. And then I get an award, and I guess, well, it wasn't that bad. I'll have to keep trying more and more. And so that really helped. I think it's really important, especially in an educational institution like that, to be able to have positive reinforcement. And it definitely helped me out because I'd be playing guitar right now if I didn't have that. Didn't have someone there to say, you're doing well and keep going on the right track.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you also look at it as a push to improve yourself, that you could almost say, well, gee, I'm just winning all these awards. I can just stay the way I am.
Yeah, but no, it's not like that.
It's not like you,
right,
from what I can tell.
Just,
You've gotten to play with Dick Hyman, Dave Grusin. Is this some of these workshops?
This was a workshop, yeah. This is one I did last year, last summer, the Henry Mancini Institute. That was a month long. It was great. Got to meet a lot of wonderful musicians. Bob Mintzer was there. It was a whole Philharmonic, so it was the first year that they had the workshop. And I thought it was a great, wonderful workshop, be able to meet. It's just like the Jazz in July and the Vermont Jazz Summer Workshop, being able to meet top people in the field and be able to perform along with them. And so they had a Philharmonic, they had big band, orchestra, small groups.
Do you have a business card?
Well, I moved and I have to get one.
I'm just curious because, what's interesting is you meet all these people. I'm wondering if you feel, if you look into the future and say, I would like this person to have my name, because you never know. So are you the type of, are you a self-promoter somewhat?
I always try to give out some kind of card. For a while I had ones where I had my picture on the side. So, try to, something different with the bass, I've always tried to let me see, how would I say that?
Let music speak for itself.
Music speak for itself. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to put it.
I suppose. But your attitude towards, I think, the gigs is also important too. That from the playing we've done together, I know that you're always on time. You always want to look the part, and people notice that.
I always enjoy every one too.
Yeah. Tell me about where your education is right now in music and how you feel about it.
Well, I'm going to UMass, the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, in my junior year, although I probably have about 3 more years left because I'm doing a double major in music education and jazz performance. And I'm also taking the minimum amount of full-time each semester now. My first 2 years, I kind of thought I would get done in 4 years, and so I took 20, 21 credits, and it was just too much. So now I'm down to 12 or 15 credits so that I can do my performing on the outside, the gigs at night. And because I'm trying to build up, my career and contacts while I'm still in school so that I'll have something for when I get out, rather than a lot of students, they try to wait till they get out of school and then say, well, then I'll go run down to New York or, try to make a name, or I don't know, but I think it's better to just build them up gradually at the same time so that I'll have work for when I get out of school. And eventually I'd like to teach, maybe at the high school or university level.
Do you feel you have to go to New York to, well, you've already been to New York.
Well, I think Western Mass is very nice. It's very convenient to New York and to Boston and upstate New York, and so it's a very central location. I like it, and I think I'd just be happy just to commute to any job I get down there.
So are you telling me that you don't see a future as a full-time jazz musician for yourself?
Well, I would like to, but as eventually I'd like to teach, but also do a lot of playing. That's why I'd like to maybe the university level, because then there's less you can leave.
Yeah, you have to be there for 3.5 days a week.
Yeah, well, like public high school. Originally I was thinking about that, but then it's a big time commitment.
It sure is.
It is. You have marching band after school, and I still want to be able to continue performing and playing because you have to keep up with it. You can't just,
We've talked with actually a lot of musicians who were mostly self-taught because when they were growing up there was not jazz education. Do you feel that your experience and your classmates' experience is enough to make them be able to function in the real world of jazz music?
Well, I think, the classroom is part of it, maybe. But I think one of the most important things to remember is like how jazz started out itself, which would be like musicians getting together and performing, publicly or anything. I tend to learn on the job, if you might want to put it. Each gig is a learning experience for me, and a lot of those types of, learning experience from gigs, you don't learn in a classroom. It's like those last minute or something goes wrong on the job, you learn from that. Yeah. It's, kind of a off-the-cuff type of...
Is it possible to create that atmosphere in a school somehow?
I don't think so. I mean, they can also have, performances, but I think you have to have a variety of different, you can't be always playing with the same musicians, too. It's meeting different musicians, different ages, who have different experience levels, and being able to perform with them in a variety of different settings. There's shows, there's, small clubs, to, big bands, combos, all types of different situations to perform in, and or rehearsals. That's how I think that's a very important thing in the learning is a variety. And classroom is one aspect of that, but there's a larger picture that you have to include too.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember when we played one of the schools up near here, and one of the students asked you, "Doesn't it hurt what you're doing? Is it physically demanding? And have you ever had any, is your body telling you that this is really hard work, playing the stand-up bass?"
I think, the bass is a very physical instrument. I mean, just by the size and, the strings. It's, I think all instruments in some way are, demanding, whether it's a wind instrument and it's, air capacity or all that. I mean, I've had problems. I had played a very large 7/8 bass for a while, and my hand just isn't that big. And I had a very high action, and I injured my hand, and for a whole year, I couldn't play with my pinky. And I'm just recovering from that right now. I mean, when I played down at the Sweet Basil's, I couldn't use it. It was like three fingers. I had to play a smaller size bass, 5/8, with very low action. So it can be very physically demanding, but, your hand gets stronger as you do more playing, too. So, I mean, it's physically demanding, but you also, get used to it, too. I mean, the calluses are built up already, so I don't have to worry about that. And so just as long as you take it easy, and not play instruments that are too big or set up the wrong way.
Did you ever feel left out because you couldn't spend a lot of time doing your long nails?
No, I never felt that at all. No, I never got into that, no. Well, from the guitar, it was always, well, a lot of nail work, but that was like, you had to make sure your nail was in perfect condition so you could play the concert the next day.
It wasn't so much so that you could put the polish on it.
I never got into the stereotypical, like, junior high, high school type of, no. To me, music was my focus, Yeah. That's... Wow. Yeah.
Can you think of some gigs that you've played, this may take a minute for you to think of, but that have been really difficult for one reason or another? Just like, wow, I'm glad that's done with.
Well, I know that we were talking about physical difficulties before. Like I did a performance. I got called up to do a performance of a Latin band, and I never played Latin music before. And so, like the week before, one of the guys in the band said, "Well, I'll show you what the bass lines are like, you know." And a lot of them are like the salsa music's all fifths, you know. So you're using your first and your fourth finger to play fifths on the bass. And I was playing the big 7/8 bass, and to play a whole night of salsa and merengue and all that type of music, that was very physically demanding. So, you know, that I would say that was a performance that was difficult in that way.
Also, from a Latin music is very specific what the bass does too. I mean, there always seemed to be anticipating in some of that music.
Well, in the salsa music, yeah, that there is.
Did you know that when you went into it?
Well, that's why I needed I need somebody to show me what it was first, because I was like, well, you know. But, you know, I was very careful. I listened to exactly what they said, and I mean, the gig turned out great. You know, it was wonderful. I did a lot of Latin music after that, which contributed to my hand injury. But you know, it's just paying careful attention. It showed me a couple different styles of music, some examples. The guy played them on the piano also, you know, showed me the bass line on the piano. So, you know, I was able to do that. And I like that kind of music now.
Yeah.
But let me see. What
we were talking about just difficult gigs and.
Okay, yeah. There's been other times when, like first when I didn't have a lot of tunes memorized. I remember there was one job where they had a singer come up, and there were maybe 30 tables. It was a big band number, and they were having the singer come up and do some tunes with a small group, you know, just a combo, piano, bass, and drums combo. And she said she wanted to play a little game with the audience, and that she knew all thousands of tunes, and that they could rattle off a tune, and that she'd do a little part of it. And I was concerned about that, so because, you know, I didn't know all these tunes. I'd only been playing for a few years, you know. But it worked out really good. You know, it was a lot of concentration. It was draining that way, you know. It just the ears were open, and I could see the piano player's left hand from about 10 feet away, you know, and so that was demanding for that. But, you know, I like the challenge. I like that. I think it makes me work harder, and I learn a lot more that way, you know.
That's tough in two respects, because a lot of times the women's voices, if they're doing standards, you're not doing them in the standard key anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, you're doing Misty and B flat and stuff like that. And
well, another one I think was when I was down at with Benny Waters in New York at I think it was the St. Peter's Church, and we did a performance. Cyrus Chestnut was on piano, and a gentleman, Vinnie Johnson, on drums. And Benny had called off a tune, a ballad I'd never heard of before. And, you know, I think there were about 300 people at this performance, and people were sitting on the floor. I mean, it was packed, you know. And all of a sudden, Benny calls off this tune, he's counting it off, and I have no idea. I've never heard of it before. It does not ring a bell, you know. And I look over at Cyrus, and I was like, help me out, you know, I don't know what this is. So he was really good, you know, he was playing some of the bass notes, you know, and I could hear where he was going with it, you know, I was trying to memorize it on the, you know, and, you know, we did the first chorus, he took a solo, then Benny took a solo, then he had me take a solo on it, and I was lucky just by being able to memorize it. By the time that my solo came around, I kind of knew how the piece went, and I don't even remember the name of the piece, you know, it was just so that was demanding too, you know, but I love that. I mean, that's a great challenge, you know.
Did you ever get in those situations where it's like a jam session and you're playing one tune for 15 or 20 minutes and all the horn players finally get their thing done, and then they give it to you?
And the bass solo, yeah, right. Yep, I've had that. That's a physically demanding type of, yeah. But it's good, you know, I like that.
We'll talk about memorizing tunes. Do they help you out in school with suggestions like, here's tunes you should know? you know?
Well, I haven't really found that, no, but I haven't really taken any. I took one jazz composition class at school, but I don't have any jazz lessons. Like, my lessons are classical, and all my harmony has been classical, and ear training's been classical. So I find that, you know, I just apply that to jazz. So, you know, we'd be studying like a Bach prelude or a Bach fugue and the harmonic structure of that. So, but, you know, and that's in the ear training, where it's, we'd have to sing and do solfeggio. That's all helped with memorizing tunes, but nobody's actually said, you know, I've never had any jazz classes and that say, well, you should memorize this, or this is how you should improvise, and I haven't gotten to that yet. You know.
You haven't gotten to jazz classes yet?
Well, not really. I mean, there's one improv class that I took, but that was more like, they were just showing, you know, it was really basic.
Yeah.
You know, this is a seventh chord, or that, you know, that type of thing. So most of it, you know, my jazz playing has been learning from on the job, learning from performing with different musicians.
Well, I kind of made a joke before the cameras were rolling about reincarnation. I'm beginning to think that maybe it's really true. That you were a jazz bassist in the 20s and 30s.
I don't know. I love it, though. I love the bass, and yeah, it's, you know, it's great. It's a great instrument, and I'm glad I ran into it. And,
has there been a process of working backwards with learning the history of the jazz bass for you?
Well, definitely. Now that I'm doing a lot of playing, and obviously I'm interested in the instrument, you know, I love it. Now I want to learn more about it, learn more about every, you know, different bassists, individual styles. Now do the transcriptions, you know, that type of thing. Well, I've already learned, like, I've started to develop my own sound. Now you know, I want to learn all that history part of it, and so. It's, yeah, I think it is working backwards a little bit. I mean, I started into it like playing, you know, rather than learning about it. So.
If I could see your collection of albums and or CDs, would I get a hint as to what your real favorite stuff is?
Well, favorites are always changing too, but I also like listening to a lot of vocalists. You know, I have one of my favorites is Shirley Horn, and there's I think it's a newer one, You Won't Forget Me. It's called, it has Buster Williams on bass, you know, I like that.
Greatest.
And, you know, I like one of the discs Benny Waters told me to get, was one of his, is Swinging Again. You know, I really enjoy playing that one. I got a Ray Brown bass face. That's, there's another vocalist, Larry Brown, Swing Dean. He's not really that much known. I met him up at the Vermont Jazz Summer Workshop one year, but the musicians on the disc are, I mean, just so wonderful to listen to. So then again, you know, it's, a lot of them are just hearing something I like and then going out and buying that, rather than for the artist itself. You know, like I just picked up the Joe Beam, Jazz Masters, the Verve one there, and I love that one. I heard that one a lot of times. I finally broke down and bought it. You know, it's just so a lot of variety.
You had a chance to record yourself? Do you have
a little bit. I've done some demos for other people, not my own, but played on other albums, and I just got one in the mail, actually, a CD that I had. It's more towards type of like folk type of music, so a variety. Don't have anything of my own yet. I'm waiting.
Well, you got a few years.
Yeah, got a whole lot of time to prepare for that.
Bass players oftentimes complain that the sound men don't get their sound in the studios, so
yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen to you when you finally get a.
Well, there's a lot of variety. I mean, like the last one I did, it was just a mic on the bass, you know, and other times it direct. I mean. But I'm in no rush to really do my own recording yet. I'm waiting for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel that being a young woman bass player is a help or a hindrance in the world of music for you? Have you had any indication of that yet?
Not really. Not a lot, no. I mean, either way. I mean, there's been little situations, but I think with any musician, there's always some kind of block or help. I feel that, you know, since jazz music is a very open form of music, it doesn't really make a difference, like, of your gender or how old you are or your background. I haven't really found that to be the case. No, I've found that you know, I just try to let the music speak for itself, and you know, I haven't really found it to be a hindrance at all. No.
Good. Is it ever? I'm trying to think of the word. A little imposing, not imposing. A little threatening, working mostly in the world of men, in situations like that.
No, I mean, I just basically consider each musician. They, you know, they could be blank. You know, I mean, as far as I don't really differentiate.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? You know, it's just I go by, you know, playing. You know, it's not. I mean, I don't really think when I walk into a gig, oh, well, there's a group of men and I'm the only woman, or there's only one other woman. I don't really see that, you know. It's just, that's a saxophone player, and there's a drummer, and, you know. So, and everybody gets together and they play, and that's what counts. You know, it's making the music, not who's making it.
Right. You keeping up your guitar these days?
Well, I'm planning on getting back with it a little more. I had the hand injury, and so I'm just trying to do the bass right now, you know, until the hand totally heals. It's just a nerve problem, you know. I've got pushed down on the string and I get a really sharp pain. So basically just doing the minimum amount of playing on the bass that I can, and no extra instruments, so just the bass.
I'm kind of always fascinated when you think of the bass players in the kind of the pre-amplifier days, how they were expected to drive, be part of the rhythm section, to drive like a big band, you know, and how were they heard?
Well, I think one of the big things that a lot of people may forget about is that back then the bands didn't play as loud. So they would only play as loud as, you know, they could hear the bass player. So even though the bass player had, you know, high action strings, really loud, you know, that style of playing, the bands weren't all at, you know, quadruple forte that they play now. They were a lot softer, so you could hear the softer instruments. They didn't, you know, cover up the sound of the bass. So, you know, I mean, every once in a while I'll still rehearse with the string bass acoustically with the big band, but, you know, it's not the same because a lot of the times, you know, they're just playing as if you had an amplified bass, you know. You have, you know, the horn players are blaring out and the drummer's just as loud, and you know, that's why it doesn't work anymore a lot of the times, having an unamplified bass, because the other musicians forget, well, we have to play softer like they used to back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s.
And when they were backing up singers, too.
That's right.
The singers had to hear themselves.
Right, yeah. And recording into, you know, that's, everybody played softer, the levels were down farther.
I think society in general is louder.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Latin music's definitely loud.
Yeah. If we had a chance to do another interview in 20 years, gosh, what would you hope you can tell me about?
Well, I hope that hand injuries wouldn't keep me from playing the bass, and that I could still keep doing, I mean, what I really love, and that's performing and playing, and that I've just, you know, been enjoying and have a lot of more experiences in performing, and you know, I like to be able to travel around into different places. I know, like this summer, I'm going to Europe, to Greece and Turkey, do a little bit of playing down there. So I hope to do more experiences like that. You know.
Well, you going over to play?
Yes. Yeah.
With whom?
Well, there's a group, UMass. It's called Trade Winds. and it's like a faculty and some extra musicians too. It's form a little corps of a jazz combo that plays for the chorale, the UMass chorale. So they'll do chorale music and then they'll do some playing on the side. But it's a great opportunity. It's traveling. It's seeing places. So just hope to keep, doing what I like.
Right. You going to take your own bass over there, or do they have to line up an instrument for you?
I've got one to take over there, and not a good one, but
Right.
yeah, just in case. Yeah.
Who of the real veteran bassists around these days have you been able to meet? I'm curious if you've met Milt Hinton yet.
No, I haven't. I haven't. I met Rufus Reed for like a minute a couple years ago at it was Massachusetts Music Educators Convention. But no, I haven't been able. I met Ray Brown this past summer at that Henry Mancini Institute. But I look forward to meeting them. But
Are there any other women bass players on the scene? I mean, I know there's some, but are you familiar with any of them, or does it not make that much of a difference?
I don't know any personally, really. I mean, I know of some, but I don't know them. But yeah, that's not something I really pay attention to. It just.
You just do your own thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious as if you've been or seen any of these what they call jazz parties recently. They are gigs that they book a lot of mostly veteran musicians into like a hotel, and they have a whole weekend of music. Mm-hmm. You've been aware of those kinds of things?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I've seen.
I suspect if someday you're going to get a call to do one, that's why.
Okay.
Okay, and you can say, yeah, Monk told me about that.
Yeah, all right, wonderful, thank you.
It's interesting because they don't book bands, they book individuals, and then
bring them together.
Promoters put together in a certain ensemble, and you play for an hour, and then a different group of people get up. But to do that, you have to have the language down, and you have to know those kind of tunes that Benny Waters might turn around and say, blah, blah, blah. And did he even tell you what key you were in, by the way?
Yeah, I don't remember. All I knew was that I had no idea what the tune was, and, so. But it worked out fine. It was good, thank goodness. But it's the challenges that are good.
What was it like to be, we talked about the gig at Birdland a little bit. Did you get good feedback from the audience?
Oh, you mean Sweet Basil?
Sweet Basils, okay. I'm sorry, yeah.
It was a great audience. I mean, it seemed to be, packed in there. And yeah, I think they really enjoyed it. I mean, it was good because it was a jazz club. People were there to hear the music. There's so many places that, sometimes you end up playing where there's a television going on, and but this was the people were there to hear the music, and they enjoyed it, and it was great. It was great, and I enjoy having an audience that's receptive, and and appreciative.
Mm-hmm. From a financial standpoint, are you pleased? I don't know if you have a basis for comparison, but have you heard about what the going rate for playing jazz gigs in New York is these days?
I wouldn't know exactly, no. I mean, it depends on what kind of gig, I suppose. I mean, at a club would be different than at...
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you...
I'm just wondering if it looks to you like you could make money actually doing that kind of thing at this point.
Well, I think the key is, one, not to concentrate yourself into one specific spot, too. Like, I try to get out. I did the playing a little bit in New York and a little bit in the Boston area, up in Vermont, as far up as Burlington, over here to Utica. I think it's important to spread out, and also in Connecticut, so that you have a lot of different contacts. Mm-hmm. And so, one night I'll be playing in Western Mass, and the next night I'll be playing in Connecticut, and, 2 days later I'll be up in Vermont. So.
Have bass will travel.
Exactly. So, so far it's worked out very well. Yeah. And you know, if it's enough just so that I can keep, you know, I can keep up the instrument, the equipment, a roof over my head, and transportation to get there, that's what makes me happy.
Okay. Well, I think you ought to move to Utica then. We'll give you enough to pay your gas. Well, this has been fascinating talking to you. I wondered if there's anything that you'd like to take an opportunity to say that I haven't asked you about.
Oh boy, that's offhand. I can't really think of that.
What's the next kind of important gig you have coming up? Any name people?
That's hard to say.
You have.
I mean, I know, like, I'll be doing the Jazz in July workshop in the summer as a kind of like a faculty member. Did that last year too, as a house rhythm section for vocalists. And I've got something that should be, I think it's October 17th, with Sheila Jordan and Harold Danko as a piano player, and Greg Caputo's drummer. And that's at the Iron Horse in Northampton. But that's a little far off right now, so that'll be one of the first gigs under my own name, so that'll be nice.
Well, you're certainly rubbing shoulders with some good company.
I enjoy it, yeah. It's great. I think it's important to be able to perform and have, you know, the experience playing with, you know, experienced musicians, you know, and I learned so much from that every performance. So I'm really grateful of that.
Well, the music's been good to you, and I think you're being good at the music, so I wish you best in your career.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. I enjoyed this. Thank you.
Suddenly appeared before me, the only one my arms will ever hold. I heard somebody whisper, please adore me.